So I'm gonna let the chickens out again. And yeah, I'm gonna talk about chickens again. I've come to the conclusion that since I've started my new channel, that I can talk about anything off-grid related here. I don't have to worry about building this channel anymore because the other channel is gonna supplement it. So I'm gonna let them out a little early today so we can talk about chickens. Doesn't it look like a pack of dogs coming running out? They're pets. Every bit of a pet is a dog. People want me to get a dog so bad. I told you the other day I wasn't going to get a dog. And of course, there are pet owners out there who believe everybody should have a dog. And I'm going to be honest, I don't want the responsibility. I'm quite happy with what I got, and my pets produce food. But it is incredible how people will tell you, get so mad when you say you don't want a dog. It's like you've hurt their sensibilities or something. And I learned this when I was a nomad. I used to talk about not having a dog on the travels because it's too hot, hard to feed, and they'd be miserable. I saw dogs out there in the national forest with their owners, and they're just laying underneath the picnic table, depressed all day. And people get so mad at me. So I try not to talk about dogs too much, but I didn't think it would hurt to say that I don't want a dog, but yeah, you're not allowed to say that either. So the chickens have been doing pretty good. They all seem pretty happy and healthy. I wish I knew what this was, because Two-Face is the only ones that will eat it. Two-Face is the silver one here. And whatever it is, she really likes these berries. I'm not sure what that is. I can't find any information about it. She hasn't died from it, so I guess it's okay. We went through a cold spell, and I'm really thankful that the cold spells, the cold snaps that we're having this year isn't lasting as long as they did last year. Last year we had 2 weeks of single digits and below zero temperatures for 2 solid weeks, and it was pretty tough. But we didn't have chickens then. This time it got cold for 2 days and warmed back up. Today it's supposed to be at freezing, 32 degrees. That's pretty manageable. Yesterday I think it got above freezing. I think it got 40 degrees yesterday. You know, it drops down in temperature and comes back up. Now tomorrow it's supposed to, I think the high is 18 and the low is 10. So it's gonna be pretty cold, but then it jumps right back up to reasonable temperature. So with the water tank, that's pretty easy to manage. I'll fill the tank again today, kind of top it off with warm well water. But as far as chickens surviving these cold temperatures, I would worry about them if we had a 2-week cold spell. I would probably try to figure out a way to keep them warm. I don't know, maybe build a fire in a little pit or something. Maybe cut a hole in the canopy of the run and put a burn barrel in there. They could, sit around. I would try to figure out something so they would stay a little bit warmer. These chickens are winter birds. The meat birds that we had over the summer, they wouldn't have been able to tolerate it. They don't have enough feathers. They don't like the cold or the heat. The problem with the heat, all you gotta do is just make sure they got plenty of water. With water, we made these buckets that had these little water feeders on them, and that worked out pretty good. Now, of course, the one we have in there is all froze up. So again, you gotta worry about water in the winter just as much as you gotta worry about water in the summer. But in this case, we got these little water feeders. We got a bunch of these, and I just swap them out every 2 hours. Things like this. So I swap those out every 2 hours, make sure they have fresh water. And then I bring the one that was outside in and let it thaw out. When I got up the day that it was really cold, the chickens wouldn't come out of their coop. So this is what I call the chicken run right here. And this is what I call the coop. Now with the coop, I put straw down on the floor so they would stay warm. Down on the floor, I used hardware cloth. So that provides plenty of ventilation in the summertime. But in the wintertime, it just blows right in there. And so you don't want to have a lot of breezes in your chicken coop. So I've got windows on it, so that hardware cloth you saw, I put over here on the summer. I take this off, this window, and I put the hardware cloth there. That way they have a nice ventilation. But then in the winter, I trade it out, put the window back in. As long as you keep the wind and the rain off of them, they'll do fine. Their comb, I've talked about this before, their comb can get frostbite, and their feet. Carolyn actually had a chicken lose a foot with their comb. So with the comb, they put their wings over their head, and that keeps them warm. But if they get wet, that's when they're in trouble. The other day it rained, and that night it was supposed to get real cold. And one of the chickens I could see was wet. So I grabbed her and I took her inside and I dried her off as good as I could. Got her dried off, and then I brought her back. And she did fine. There was no ice on her or anything. But they did stay in the coop, the chicken coop, all day. They didn't come out. What these chickens will do is they'll huddle together. So they wouldn't come out to drink their water or eat their food. So I brought the food and water into the coop. Carolyn gave them some mesh, and we put this in here. This is our little feeder, but we got one of these inside the coop also. And then she gave them mesh. Feeding them food helps keep them warm. Another thing I do is before winter starts, we start just feeding them corn. The corn does two things. One, it will fatten them up. Corn will fatten anything that consumes it. Corn is very fattening. So if you eat pastas and all that, that's all fattening. So Grandpa used to feed pigs corn right before he butchered them, so he'd fatten them up. That way we can get all the lard off of them. Well, that's what I did with the chickens. I've been feeding them corn for probably 2 months now, getting them ready for the cold. But in the spring, I got to get them off the corn and let them come out here and run around and fly around as much as possible so I can get them to lose weight so they don't overheat in the summer. The feathers keep them warm. That's the key, is you want to make sure you have a good hardy winter breed. We have Americanas, New Hampshires, and Buff Orpingtons. All of them are winter breeds. Like I said, the meat birds we had, the Cornish Cross, they wouldn't have survived a minute in this cold weather. When they become old enough that they have full grown feathers, they'll do fine. But you don't want to try to raise chickens in the wintertime from chicks. Last winter we got chicks, and the hatchery sent them in the mail. Well, I knew that was a bad idea. I had no idea why they would do that. They promised that the post office would call us and let us know that the chickens were there and we could go pick them up. But they didn't. They brought them out in a delivery van with the windows wide open, and they died. But we raised all our chickens inside, which was a bit of a challenge when we're living off grid, because you had to keep the temperature above, 90 degrees? So that means the house was constantly hot. So we would open a window, and then of course all the chickens, the little chicks, would get cold. And I forget what it is, I think 14 weeks, you got to keep them above, at a certain temperature, 80 to 90 degrees or something. You can Google it. Actually, when you get the chickens, they'll have instructions on how to keep them warm. So what we did was every couple hours, I would get up out of bed, or during the day, I would go and I'd fill up a quart jar with hot water. Fill it up with our on-demand water heater, and I'd set it in there, and they would all huddle around that. That way we didn't have to keep the house quite as hot. But that was pretty miserable until I figured that out. So when we went and bought the Americanas, we told the lady, she said, "How are you going to keep them warm?" She was concerned that we weren't going to mistreat the chickens. And I told her that's how we were going to keep them warm, was hot water. And she said, "Wow, that's a great idea." And I think she actually implemented that into her practice. I mean, she was a farmer where she didn't have to run so much electric on all the lights and everything. So chickens just are not that hard to raise. And I understand the pet owners, I was talking about dogs, really want people to take care of their animals like they take care of their children. But animals are designed to be outside. I wouldn't do that to a dog, because dogs are domesticated now and they've learned to live in a house. But as far as chickens and your farm animals, it's just what they do. And they'll do things to make sure they stay warm. I mean, I felt bad for them, don't get me wrong. I hated that they had to stay inside the coop all day. But they did, and the next day they stayed in the coop until about 9 a.m. and the temperatures got up to about 18 degrees. And that's when they came out, was 18 degrees. So I think it was probably a little too cold for them down there at the 10 degree mark. So we got one more day of that, Those temperatures getting that cold again, and if we can get through that day, then for at least the next 10-day forecast says that we're in good shape. So those folks that are saying that I need to bring heat into the chicken coop, you know, a heat lamp or something, I looked into this. The most common cause of death of chickens, other than natural causes, is fires. People put a heat lamp in there and the chicken will knock it over, or, you know, whatever, it gets bumped and it catches fire. And I'm not disagreeing with this too much, because in the past I had a chicken coop and I put a light bulb in there, just a regular light bulb, what, 60 watt light bulb, and I had it set up so it wouldn't touch anything. But sure enough, one of the chickens knocked it over to one of the wood boards inside. It was just a 2x2 or 2x4 or whatever, and that light bulb charred that 2x4. I just can't imagine how it didn't catch on fire. Now, there is quite a bit of movement, I will say, when it was cold that night. What I think's happening is they rotate around. So you got one chicken out on the end, so one side of its body is cold. So after an half hour or so, that chicken tries to get into the center of everybody. So it's just a constant rotation of the chickens moving around trying to stay warm. But I guess that's just the way it works. But you got to imagine, every wild animal out there has to do the same thing. Turkey are out in abundance right now. I've seen them out here actually. So they have to suffer through it. If you'll do me a favor and click onto that video right here at the box, that'll take you to my other channel. I'd like for you to check that out. And if you like it, subscribe, share it with your friends. I'd really appreciate it. Help me grow that channel a little bit. I hope I can inspire you to do your research so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.